Good day, I am Diego Solreyna, and today I want to propose the death penalty for corruption in Mexico as the only way to develop our potential as a country. Mexico has the potential to be the second largest economy in the Western Hemisphere, second only to the United States, but we haven't been able to achieve this because of corruption. Today, I am formally making use of Article 71 of the Mexican Constitution, which gives me the right to propose a law. This is a proposed law, and I know there are more steps I have to take. But I'm proposing it to you first so you can start thinking about it and let me know what you think, because you would be the ones to decide whether to support it or not. It's very simple. Death penalty for corruption for Mexican politicians as the only way out of poverty and the hole we're in. Please don't pay attention to my appearance. I know I look like a beggar, a vagrant. My personal appearance is not my proposal. What is my priority is the well-being of my people and my country. I was born in Mexico and immigrated to Canada at the age of 16. And like many Mexicans, I have that desire to see my country progress like the developed country I moved to. Canada is much richer than Mexico, even though it has far fewer resources, and the reason is that in Canada, the level of corruption is much lower. And the death penalty is the only step that will propel us to do this, so it doesn't take centuries but millennia. I know that for this law to work, you, the voters in Mexico, have to support it. It needs a certain number of votes and someone to propose it in the Senate. This is the preview, the trailers. I'm presenting you the introduction. Mexico has all the elements to be a developed country, and even though we have many problems, the main one is corruption. By eliminating corruption, as others have done, also with the death penalty, we can propel ourselves toward that well-being that all Mexican men and women deserve. I may sound like it, but I'm not a politician. I'm a Mexican who loves his country, and I'm using this platform to formally make this proposal to you. Mexican brothers and sisters, what do you think? I'll explain everything step by step, listing the steps and their times. Feel free to skip to any part you prefer. Let's see why we need it. Because it's the only option. How many deaths are we talking about? How many executions? How many politicians would we have to kill? Which other countries implemented it successfully? Why would it work? All the advantages. And in this minute, we're going to look at all the disadvantages. What would happen in the following months, years, and decades after implementing this and eliminating corruption? And the final conclusion? And after watching these episodes, giving me the opportunity, listening to me, you will have the knowledge to decide if you support this proposal. Do you support the death penalty for corruption? Find out at the end of this video. Let's go. Why do we need the death penalty for corruption? It's very simple. Mexico loses between 5 and 10% of its gross domestic product to corruption. That is, 10% of our economy is stolen by corrupt officials and their accomplices. But this is only the cash figure that shows us the effect. What that money could have produced for the population is much greater. If someone steals your wallet, you don't just lose the cash you had in there. You have to replace your cards, you have to change your passwords. You can't get to work early anymore, you lose that day of work, you need another day to go to the bank to replace them. Imagine that on a large scale for the entire Mexican population. These are billions of dollars lost to corruption. This is fuel theft, theft of public funds, which triples the cost of public works for us. Officials, thieves who get out of jail, infrastructure projects that are charged at triple the cost and simply aren't built. This video could last 5 hours, just giving you the worst examples from this year. There are TikTok accounts that specifically give you examples of corrupt Mexican politicians that make you angry, and they upload 10 videos a day. As a result of all this stolen money, about 30% of Mexicans live in poverty. If we consider just poverty, meaning being below what is considered the lower class, we have almost 46 million Mexicans. 5.3% is extreme poverty, and yes, I understand that there are lazy people, I understand that there are people who don't like to work, of course. But we have 7 million people in extreme poverty. Are you going to tell me that out of those 7 million, none of them would have gotten ahead in a country with opportunities? What this person lacked wasn't the desire to get ahead, it was those opportunities that corruption no longer created. You see, we don't just lose 10% of our economy to corruption, we lose 100% millions of people. And here, something even sadder. About 50% of children and young people in Mexico live in poverty. If it offends you that I'm proposing execution, firing squad, guillotine, or hanging for corrupt officials, doesn't it hurt you that half of our children and young people are living in poverty? In 2018, 52% of people under 17 lived in poverty. While 99.9% of officials and politicians steal something, we have 5 million children living in extreme poverty. This is not fair. It's unacceptable. What hurts you the most? 5 million children who go to sleep without eating, who go to school without lunch and without shoes, that we hang and execute a few politicians? Choose. You have to set your priorities. You can't keep rearranging your priorities. With that taboo that Mexico doesn't have the death penalty because it's given to children and not to corrupt politicians. Why do we sentence millions of children to hunger and a lifetime of living paycheck to paycheck, counting pennies, and sentence these people to tax havens, political careers just for stealing, and they retire as multimillionaires in other countries? We should kill them so they stop killing our children. We have 2.5 million children working in dangerous activities. Do you think it's fair for a child to risk their life at work? While politicians pay their taxes without any risk of dying, if this child is at risk of dying, then this politician should also be at risk of dying. I'm sorry, but it should be fair. If we're sending children to work in boilers, cutting fish, carrying cement, risking their health and lives, 100% we have to give that same risk to the dog who's stealing from them. And here's the saddest part. We have between 125 and 150 deaths from crime per day. These are not people who had diabetes or liver failure. These are victims of crime and insecurity. Insecurity exists because of corruption. To eliminate corruption, we have to hang, strangle, or put in the gas chamber those who take 150 Mexicans from us every day. And yes, I know that many of them are members of organized crime. We don't mind losing them, but many of them are citizens, like you, like me, like our children, or they're simply caught in the crossfire, or someone tries to steal their things. If we already have 150 deaths per day in Mexico, why can't we have 150 politicians dead per year? Just look at the difference it would make if you were a politician and said that. Like, I see my citizens die every day. Could it happen to me? Believe me, they'll think 10 times before stealing a single cent. Now imagine billions of dollars, and here's the key part. Me, talent. I left the country, and I'm not saying I have talent, but I am an example of a Mexican who left. I could have stayed to work in my country, but I looked for opportunities. Because I'm from the poorest state in Mexico, the most messed up state, the most illiterate, the most malnourished, the most rundown, the most everything, all because of corruption, even though we're the richest state. We are from the areas with the greatest biodiversity and natural wealth on planet Earth that have ever existed since our planet evolved. That's Chiapas, a place full of wealth, populated by people full of poverty. Because of corruption, you're not going to fool me. You're not going to tell me that corruption doesn't have an impact. It affected me. At 16, I was separated from my family, my parents, my teachers, my friends, from everyone I ever loved, in search of opportunities that I found in a developed country colonized by the British Empire. They did create a system, a structure that benefits the local population. They did build a country with their own people in mind. The British white man, at all costs, condemned the native Canadian indigenous people who lived there to death in order to enrich themselves for their own benefit. Here's an example. Canada, a country that's frozen half the year, manages to have one of the largest economies in the world. Such a small population can produce so much. Why can a Mexican raise their quality of life so much by going to Canada, a country with less? Because a Chiapaneco from the richest area of Mexico, my life improved so much, it exploded in quality just because I went to a country that's poorer in resources. Corruption, and I'm not the only one. Thousands of people, thousands of Mexicans do the same thing I did every day, and we wouldn't have to if there wasn't corruption. If I endured not seeing my parents for 6 years after I turned 16, then a corrupt politician has to endure the noose around his neck. When he stole the taxes that would have created the opportunities I needed. I have a motto in life which is, be the person you needed when you were a child. Well, when I was a child, I needed officials who weren't corrupt, but they don't exist. We have to create them. and the only way we're going to create them is with the threat of death. This isn't a lack of empathy. It's not being bloodthirsty. It's not wishing harm on anyone. It's wishing well for our population in general. And to put a stop once and for all to those who steal what belongs to us. We're not asking for charity. This death penalty law for corruption is not intended to ask for charity. Just don't steal what belongs to me, what you've already taken from me, my taxes. How many executions are we talking about? How many politicians are going to the gallows? How many coffins of dead politicians are we going to see? Well, not many. Let's make an estimate. Let's compare it to the cartels. When a new cartel enters an area to impose fear and control, and they have to make themselves respected through fear, not through actual respect. They want obedience and submission from the population through fear. How many do they kill? Let me give you an example. I've seen entire towns in Chiapas with between 60,000 and 100,000 people where organized crime only had to kill 1 or 2 people. We would do the same here if we killed 1 or 2 officials from each branch in Mexico. Would that be enough? The rest were afraid. I lived in Cancun for a long time, and their people are extremely terrified of the Zetas cartel. They're so afraid that they don't even mention their name. They say the ones from the last letter. They're so terrified that they don't even say Zetas. And how many people do the Zetas kill? Well, they kill their rivals, but those don't count. They kill their collaborators who betray them. Those don't count either. But speaking about the general population, business owners who refuse to pay the fee, taxi drivers who refuse to pay the fee. There aren't many, just a few per month at most, and this keeps the people of Quintana Roo so submissive that they're afraid to even say the name. Why don't we turn the tables on them? Let there be enough executions for extreme and proven corruption, so that politicians are afraid to even say the word corruption. Let them say, I think so-and-so committed the thing with the letter C. Let's put that fear into them. Which brings us to the next chapter. What other countries have done it? Well, Singapore imposed its death penalty, but it didn't kill that many officials, and it worked wonderfully. I went to Singapore and made a report about this. The country that in 30 years went from being a slum of poverty to the richest country in Asia. And they did it because they made corruption punishable by death. There were more things which we'll see in a moment, but the key was the death penalty for corruption. China has implemented it, but corruption remains. At the very top, it's only the lower levels, the police, the officials, all those strict ones, where there's no corruption, but at the top, there is. China is a single authoritarian party, and we don't want that. We want a good democracy, so China is a reference, a mention, but not a model to follow. Our model to follow is a combination between Singapore and the Nordic countries, which I have also visited. I made this documentary for you called The Country Without Poverty, where I visited Denmark, Norway, Finland, the least corrupt countries in the world. Unfortunately, Mexican officials are not going to behave like the officials from the Nordic countries. We have to do what Singapore did so that we can have a Nordic-style government applied to Mexico. We're not talking about a lot of deaths. And as the years go by and generations of politicians learn to behave, we would have less than 1 execution per year in a system that works without corruption, becoming more and more efficient. In the first year, yes, there would be about 10 or 11 going to the gallows each month. But as this progresses, and politicians see that the Mexican people are serious, that we mean business, when we tell them, if you kill me, I'll kill you, and they'll start getting it, they have to fall in line, and if they don't want to, then they shouldn't get into politics. Nowadays, the mentality is that if you want easy money, if you want to get rich, get into politics. It's not about wanting to serve your people or wanting to serve the nation. The requirement to be a politician in Mexico is that you have a silver tongue, promise people whatever you want, and have the cunning to steal. Has it ever been about caring for the well-being of your people and your community? That's the transition I want to make. We have to start choosing those who truly want to serve their country because they love it and don't care how much they earn. And remove them and get rid of all the weeds who only want to get in to enrich themselves. As the saying goes, those who pay to get in to steal. We don't want people who invest in political campaigns just so they can get their investment back with interest. We want people who love their country and have empathy for other human beings in their community, who are willing to dedicate their intelligence and excellence to improving our society with strategic structures for economic growth. If you see the difference, imagine that there's a position here, a position of deputy, senator, mayor, and those who see it as something good. Oh, the lazy thieves who want to get rich, the altruistic people, good Samaritans don't even look at it. We have to change that trophy of being a politician from here as an economic incentive to here as a moral opportunity to serve. Let's shift away from the mindset of investing in my campaign just to retire. Millionaire, he who does not live to serve is not fit to live. Don't ask for my vote if you don't want to serve. Well, exactly. How would this work? Who carries out the execution? Who puts the noose around the neck? Who decides who goes? Well, they have to be institutions that are not involved in corruption, and no Mexican institution can be trusted. They have to be foreign entities, not from a specific country, but entities formed by several countries. And that's where we would ask for help or recruit experts from the least corrupt countries in the world, combined with countries that are experts in identifying corruption. We relied on the least corrupt countries in the world and hired their retired officers who specialized in identifying corruption. And we give them access to all the numbers from Mexico. It's not hard to identify corruption. In Mexico, we have them well identified. Every time a mayor steals, we know about it. What messes us up is the application of justice and the certainty of conviction. This is what's key. If this evidence of corruption goes to an outside entity made up of Norwegians, Danes, Finns, people who are not from Mexico, they have no interest, they identify it and determine it without any political interest, and above all, immune to bribery and intimidation because they would be anonymous. You won't even know what country they're in. You won't even know where their office is. There's no way to contact them. We upload the evidence to a cloud and they download it from there and review it. Let's see. This municipal president did steal. The municipal one, he is taken to a third country. The United States would be best, since the death penalty is already legal there. And the United States has already signed North American Free Trade Agreement, which is an agreement that says they commit to legal support and due process. Of course, there would have to be modifications. This is just a general idea. Let's suppose you have the mayor of a city. He stole 300 million pesos that were meant for a school, and he hired his grandson to do some construction work, and they stole all the money. Let's see, we present the evidence to this agency. The agency gets all the numbers, bank accounts, surveillance cameras, because we're going to give them access to everything, and they make a determination. If these two people committed corruption, an arrest warrant is issued, for which Mexico has the power to do wherever they are found. While all this is being verified by different entities independent from each other, one institution can make a mistake, but two can't, and even less three. After everything is proven against them, they receive the death penalty. And what happens after this person is executed? Their colleagues, the other municipal mayors, will say, "Oh, I'd better not steal." And I know what you're going to say. It's being a good patriot. It's giving authority to another country, sir. We already have McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Nestlé, Starbucks stealing from Mexico. We have Canadian mining companies looting Mexico. They're extracting more gold than during the colonial period. And doesn't it bother you? At least temporarily? We have to give authority to a foreign entity, to Mexico, because a Mexican institution can't be trusted. Once this is understood, that power can be returned to Mexico. That Mexico has the ability to, without corruption, impunity, or exceptions, sentence to death those who deserve it. But at first, it's something we can't do. I'm open to debate. Anyone who has a better proposal, an idea of how to carry out the execution, and how to monitor who decides who dies and how we kill them? Look, I'm open to debate. Invite me to any channel you want, any content creator, invite me to a debate. We can share ideas. Tell me why you think this won't work. I'm just explaining my idea, my theory, which I've developed after 6 years of studying the world's economies. By going to those countries, I've been to most of the developed countries. And the first thing I do is go to their Senate or public offices and read their public records and corruption files. I did this in all the Nordic countries. I mean, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm not 100% ignorant either. Well, let's go over some key points really quickly, which are essential for the death penalty to work and to be implemented correctly. Let's use Singapore as an example. Number one, after Singapore imposed its death penalty, the first thing it did was give high salaries to officials, meaning the officials don't have to worry about where they're going to get money to buy socks or food for their children. Officials in Singapore earn very well, but this already happens in Mexico. Shameless Mexican politicians are among the highest paid in the world. Here comes the second point. Extremely strong and independent anti-corruption agencies. This point here has to be handled abroad. Third, and also key, quick process and sentencing. No spending years with appeals, nothing like that. China discovered its Minister of Agriculture involved in corruption. They executed the whole family in less than a week. I mean, he was discovered on Saturday, and by Friday afternoon they were all already in the electric chair. So this point is key. Quick and certain sentencing, so you can be sure that you will be sentenced. None of that so-and-so was forgiven, maybe I will be too. No, 100% guaranteed. Face justice. We need certainty and speed. This point is key. Another key point that we still don't have in Mexico. It has been progressing, but we still have a long way to go, which is cultural tolerance for corruption, and this is at all levels. If you're watching this video, it means at the very least you have the idea of executing our corrupt politicians, or to some extent you support it. Well, we also have to respond. We can't keep tolerating corruption culturally. The things we do every day, like cutting in line, running a red light, parking where you shouldn't, invading the bike lane, things like that. Just like we want a nice, orderly line of politicians going to the electric chair, we also have to be orderly ourselves. Well, could we legally implement this? Well, Mexico abolished the death penalty in 2005 and militarily in 2008. I think, so this would require a constitutional reform. If a deputy, a senator, or someone doesn't support this constitutional reform, why would that be? Let's say we, the citizens, tell them we want the death penalty for corruption, and one of them says, no, why would that be? Think about it. Who would oppose it? There you have your first volunteers. Any politician who opposes this, we put his name on the list of those who go first. Mexico would also have to withdraw from human rights treaties. The strongest one, in my opinion, would be the American Convention on Human Rights. We would withdraw from there. But as I said before, we already have 150 deaths per day. That's where we, the general population, would make videos on social media, use the massive power that social networks have, and make videos in English, explaining to the world why we seek the death penalty. And we're going to tell them clearly, these politicians are killing us. This is self-defense. The ones violating human rights are them. Before you tell me that I'm violating human rights by executing him, injustice to him for executing me. Other people are going to argue that this would scare away foreign investment, that when Mexico imposes the death penalty, we would have to leave the human rights treaties, and that it will scare away tourism and foreign investment. And look, we already have cartel shootouts in Cancun, in Playa del Carmen, in Tulum, and the most recent one in Puerto Vallarta. And still, millions of people visit Mexico. It's the most visited country in Latin America. Look at this chart showing how many millions of people visit Mexico. Compared to the rest of Latin America, it's by far, the most visited country. And every time there's a cartel shootout in Mexico, it goes viral all over the world. Yes, these shootouts have affected tourism in Mexico, and yet we're still the strongest in Latin America. Therefore, the death penalty will affect foreign investment at first, but it won't devastate it because most investors will understand this. We're not going to execute civilians for stealing bread like in the Philippines or for minor crimes like other countries have done. We're going to execute politicians who had the audacity to ask for our vote and then stole millions from our taxes. Execute politicians who had the audacity to ask for our vote and stole from our taxes. Is it corruption that they want to eliminate? And as time goes by and Mexico becomes a country free of corruption, it will have the opposite effect. Who wouldn't want to invest in a country free of corruption? The cartels and the corrupt politicians who tolerate them and collaborate with them scare away more investment than the death penalty ever would. Nothing will convince me I'm wrong. More than 90% of corrupt politicians never face consequences. Trials take years, while they live like kings with our money, and political connections and corruption protect them. I know that the death penalty alone won't stop corruption 100%, but what if we implement everything with the penalty for corruption at the forefront? Look, imagine this here. Capital punishment, the death penalty, and complementing that with a high probability of being caught, almost 100% that we catch you. An impartial, incorruptible, and swift court. In a matter of weeks, you'll be executed and without political protection. No appeals, none of that nonsense they call protection for the thief. No, don't use the word appeal. It's protection for the thief. Let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. Should we start with any advantage or should we go with the disadvantages? So people don't say I live in an ideal world, that I'm dreaming. Here are the disadvantages realistically. Here it goes. No offense to Mexico, I'm just talking about reality. The death penalty in Mexico is a risk. It would be a risk for several reasons. Let's look at the main ones. Organized crime has influence in the government. That's why we need it to be an independent institution. I'm sorry. We have to sell that little piece of our homeland to those who are going to call me a traitor. Yes, we have weak local institutions, so giving the state the power to execute someone is only going to be used against political opponents. That is, politicians are going to accuse each other of corruption. It was you, it was the Institutional Revolutionary Party, it was the National Action Party, it was the Party of the Democratic Revolution, it was Morena, the same as always. That's why we're going to recruit the most efficient people in the world at detecting accusations. People from other countries are responsible for these accusations, not Mexican politicians. We've seen they're like parrots, just talking without meaning. I don't trust any of them. If the Minister of Transparency from Denmark tells me, I believe him. If the finance inspector from Finland tells me, I believe him. Is that being a traitor to my country? Suppose it is, but we don't have any other option. This would also prevent them from focusing on low-ranking officials. While they protect those at the top, what happens in China is that those at the top are protected, but the low-ranking ones are not. We don't want to eliminate corruption only among those at the bottom and let it continue among those at the top. We have to eliminate it in both. That's why it has to be an institution outside of Mexico. Ideally, Mexican institutions would be strong and transparent before imposing this punishment, but we can't. That's why you take that responsibility away from Mexico to determine who is executed and give it to someone who already has decades of transparency. Until Mexico can reliably wean itself off, so to speak, and fly with its own wings. This would be implemented step by step. You start with transparency in who you hire. None of that business where the municipal president brings in his son, his lawyer, or whoever he wants. After that, we make it mandatory for Mexico to have all its finances in digital form, just like Estonia did. I went to Estonia. It was the day of the presidential elections, and I thought the streets would be full of people voting, but they were empty. Estonia was the first country to hold its elections 100% digitally, and they can digitally track every cent the government spends. We would implement this mandatorily, monitored by these external anti-corruption institutions. Look, here's the truth. Eliminating corruption is not just about punishment. It's not just about the fear of death. There are many things like incentives, culture, institutions, the efficiency of the law, and all of that. These were the things that made countries like Singapore, South Korea, and Japan into nations with such strong economies and such low levels of corruption. They do it because of their culture, because they want to honor their community, because they are ashamed to be thieves, because in their culture, honor is the most important thing. In our culture, that's not possible, because honor is not the most important thing. Becoming rich is the most important thing. We can't adapt the system from South Korea or Japan because our culture is about making as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. We can't have the transparency of Japan and Korea because we don't have the culture of Japan and Korea. But in Mexico, we do have something, and that's the fear of death. I would get the same results, just with different motivation. The Japanese are motivated by serving their community, while Mexicans are motivated so they don't get hanged. I don't see anything wrong with that. As long as the official does their job, they can do it for whatever reason they want. And the one who only wants to get rich simply would never run for office. Now, what would happen if we implemented the death penalty for corruption? Mexico is not going to become a world power. Overnight, I know, but it would dramatically increase its progress in the right direction. Everything we haven't been able to do in 200 years would take off. Let's look at the things that Mexico already has to start with. It's among the top 15 to 20 economies in the world by gross domestic product. It has a strategic location near the United States. It has massive exports through the United States, Mexico-Canada agreement. It has a young population. It has natural resources, oil, lithium, agriculture. It has a strong manufacturing base, cars, aeronautics, electronics. And here, something that, even though it may hurt and bother many people, Mexico has plenty of, which is global influence, cultural influence. I haven't been to any part of the world where there isn't tequila, tacos, and mariachi recognized worldwide. This cultural influence is key to being an economic power. It's one of the secrets of the United States. So, let's see everything that corruption is costing us. It scares away investments and increases the cost of doing business. It weakens the police and judicial systems and allows organized crime to infiltrate all institutions. It reduces trust in the government, makes millionaires leave for other places, and protects the incompetent. And all of these would disappear when the death penalty is imposed. And I know that for Mexico to become a superpower, many more things are needed, but eliminating corruption is the strongest and most decisive step we can take. Look, let's quickly see what Mexico would need to become a true superpower. First, we need a giant economy, just like China and the United States. It needs a strong army, it needs to be a leader in technology, political stability, and global diplomatic influence. Even without corruption, we still have some challenges. We depend on the United States, but if we eliminate corruption through the death penalty, little by little, everything will fall into place. We remove our dependence on the United States, we get rid of the presence of the cartels, we eliminate inequality. You need equal education, we increase innovation, we forget about deficiencies in infrastructure, and also income equality. Look, the easiest way I can put it, eliminating corruption would unleash the true potential of Mexico. Just like when Gohan went to see the great Kaiosama, he thought it was silly that the old man was just dancing around him, but he gave him enough power to face Majin Buu. It's the same thing. It may sound silly like you say, oh, what's he going to do? Execute the politicians. But believe me, the gross domestic product would accelerate, all the rigor of the law would be applied. Would organized crime shrink and disappear? Investment starts to explode. We would all want to invest. And above all, our talent, which goes to other countries, would realistically stop leaving. How far could Mexico go? Well, it could be among the top 10 economies in the world. Easily, the second leading economy in the Western world after the United States, easily and definitely the leader of Latin America. This isn't fantasy, it's very possible. We already have most of the elements, it's just that blessed corruption that's holding us back. Look, I'm not telling you that Mexico is going to be the perfect country, that it's going to be the world's superpower. But it would definitely be much richer, much safer, with much more well-being for families, a country with a much higher quality of life, even higher than Canada, a country where families can prosper and raise their children, without fear of a shootout happening near you, without fear that the politician who stole from you will get away, without fear that your child's school was never built because they stole the budget. And as long as we have corruption, we won't be able to take these steps. Look, I'm going to speak to you in the most honest way possible. Please forgive my honesty, we Mexicans are really good people, but once we get power, unfortunately, they steal. I've never been a politician, I've never been in power. I don't know what it feels like to manage billions of dollars, but those who have done it, almost all of them have failed. Something happened inside them that made them forget they entered political power. All this money has something that changes people, and there are many who didn't change. That was their intention from the beginning. Every Mexican deserves the resources to develop their full potential and talent, and believe me, it's a lot. Mexicans are some of the most creative and talented people in the world. If you're worried a cartel might demand protection money from your business, you won't develop that creativity, will you? And your children will no longer be the children of an entrepreneur, but of a minimum wage employee. And this perpetuates itself and can't continue. For Mexico to have strong and transparent institutions, we need to recruit the right people. And if we have the promise that you are going to get rich, we will never recruit the right people. As long as the promise of being a politician is to get rich, we will never recruit the right people. When you ask your friends, who wants to come to my house, drink, eat and party, huh, everyone? And then you ask, who wants to come help me clean and wash the bathroom? Nobody, right? Politics in Mexico is the same right now. When they ask, who wants to get rich illegally, huh, everyone? Because that's what the position is for. But when they ask who wants to serve their people strictly and be punished if they don't, nobody. We have to recruit the right people, and as long as the reward for politics is wealth, we will never recruit the right people. We're only going to recruit thieves. This is my proposal. Death penalty for corruption. Let Mexico give execution, lethal injection, hanging, firing squad, or electric chair to officials. Let them be caught stealing the taxes of Mexicans as the only way to move forward and make progress. If we don't do this, it's my firm belief that we will never get out of the hole we're in. Tell me, what do you think? Do you support the death penalty? Are you a political content creator and would you like to debate about this? I'm open to debate. If you have valid points, I'll acknowledge them. If I disagree, I'll explain why I disagree and give you my sources. And let's make this a dialogue. I'm being very serious, very, very serious. We have to start this conversation because the death penalty is the only thing that will save us as Mexicans. So if this conversation makes you uncomfortable, get used to it because it's the future of Mexico. May courage be with you and see you next time.